Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more.
That is, until now. For centuries, history has been a one-way conversation. The people who made it left us their words, their deeds, their ideas, and sometimes their contradictions. We could study them, debate them, judge them. But we could never ask them another question. That is, until now. Welcome to the first Postlogue Post Script. For the first time, we're inviting you, our accomplices, to interrogate history about the world we live in today. What might Aristotle make of the way we understand sexuality and gender today? What might Viktor Frankl say about the return of anti-Semitism? Could Abraham Maslow's hammer help us understand what artificial intelligence is doing to the way we perceive problems? And what might Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings say about questions history left painfully unanswered? First, a word of caution. No one actually knows what any of these people would say. Neither does artificial intelligence. Postlogue begins with the historical record and follows reliable sources as far as they take us. When their own words survive, we use them. When their ideas are well documented, we draw from them. And when history leaves a blank, we leave it blank. What you're about to hear is not history speaking again. It is an experiment in using artificial intelligence, historical evidence, and a little informed imagination to ask, what might history answer if it could respond to our questions? The players are back, and this time, you get to ask the questions. Welcome to Postlogue PS. The experiment continues.
Welcome to the first Postlogue Post Script. 4 accomplices, 4 questions. We begin with a question about the very technology that makes this experiment possible. Our first accomplice is David from Austin, Texas. He's 31 and works training large language models, the artificial intelligence systems that are increasingly finding their way into our workplaces, schools, laboratories, and homes. And lately he's been wondering about the consequences of what he does for a living. David?
Dr. Maslow, you're often associated with the observation that if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem tends to look like a nail. I'm helping train artificial intelligence, and sometimes I wonder whether we're just building humanity a much more powerful hammer, or whether AI will actually change the problems we're capable of seeing. How do you think AI will change the way we perceive social, economic, political, and scientific problems? And what responsibility do people like me have for the tools we're creating?
David, thank you. That's a very good question, and perhaps an especially important one coming from someone helping to build the tool he's asking about. You asked me 2 things. Let me take them one at a time. First, will artificial intelligence simply become a more powerful hammer, or might it actually change the problems we're capable of seeing? When I wrote about the hammer and the nail, I was writing about science and psychology. My concern was that when we become committed to one method of understanding something, we begin selecting problems that fit the method. We see what our tools enable us to see, and sometimes we stop seeing what they don't. So yes, I think artificial intelligence could become an extraordinarily powerful hammer. If it becomes our preferred way of understanding everything, we may begin treating human beings as collections of information simply because information is what the machine can process. Love, fear, beauty, morality, creativity, happiness. Human experience contains things that resist easy measurement and classification. A better analytical tool does not make those things less real, but there is another possibility. A new tool can permit us to perceive relationships we could not perceive before. It can challenge categories we have mistaken for reality. It can allow us to examine a problem from perspectives that were previously unavailable to us. So The most interesting possibility may not be that artificial intelligence gives you better answers. It may give you better questions, and sometimes a new question changes the world more than a new answer. Now, your second question, what responsibility do you have for what you're helping to create? I wouldn't pretend that I can tell you what artificial intelligence will become. I died before anything like today's technology existed, but I spent much of my life asking what human beings might become. And that distinction matters. Don't begin only by asking what the machine is capable of doing. Ask what human need it serves. Does it help people grow? Does it enlarge their possibilities? Does it make them more creative, more autonomous, more capable of becoming what they can become? Or does it make them more dependent, more passive, more easily manipulated? Those aren't engineering questions, they're human questions. And David, the fact that you're already asking them seems to me more important than having the answers. Science should enlarge our understanding of the human being, not shrink the human being until he fits our science. So keep building your tools. But every once in a while, put down the hammer, look again at the problem, and ask whether it was ever really a nail.
Professor Maslow, thank you. And David, thank you for starting us off. Our next accomplice is Daniel from Atlanta. Daniel is married to another man. A generation ago, their marriage could not have been legally recognized throughout the United States. Since the Supreme Court's 2015 decision in Obergefell versus Hodges, it can. But Daniel has been wondering whether what's changed most is the law, or the way we think about sexuality, gender, and marriage. His question is for Aristotle.
Aristotle, my husband and I are legally married. That would have been impossible in America not very long ago. But in your own world, Athenians, Spartans, Macedonians, and Persians didn't all draw the same boundaries around sex, relationships, and the roles of men and women. Today, we're still changing those boundaries, not only around same-sex marriage, but around gender identity itself. You've now had more than 2,000 years to consider it. Are human beings changing, or are the categories we use to understand them changing?
Daniel, thank you, and my regards to your husband. You ask whether human beings have changed, or whether the categories by which societies understand them have changed. I would begin by saying that your question contains another question. What have the changes produced? That is where I would want to look. In my own time, I observed societies that organized relations between men and women, marriage, property, citizenship, and sexual conduct very differently. Athens was not Sparta. Macedonia was not Athens. Persian customs were not Greek customs, and I did not regard those differences as trivial. Customs shape households. Households shape citizens. Citizens shape the city. So when a society changes its understanding of marriage, sex, or the roles of men and women, I would want to know not merely whether the change seems just or unjust. I would ask what follows from it. You have also given me reason to reconsider some conclusions of my own. I wrote that men and women were naturally fitted to different roles, and that the male was better fitted to rule within the household. Your history has given me evidence I did not possess. Women have governed states, practiced the sciences, created businesses, advanced philosophy and medicine, and contributed to economic and civic life in ways my society rarely permitted me to observe. A philosopher who claims to learn from observation cannot dismiss 2,000 years of additional observation merely because it inconveniences him. So I must concede this much. Some things I attributed to nature were almost certainly reinforced by custom. But now I would ask the question your age must ask next. What have the consequences been? Your societies have liberated an enormous reservoir of human ability. That seems difficult to dispute. At the same time, many prosperous societies now produce fewer children than are required to replace one generation with another. I would not tell you that one development caused the other. That would be poor reasoning. Many things changed at once: wealth, education, medicine, contraception, urban life, work, marriage, expectations of parenthood. I would want evidence. I would compare societies. I would ask which causes matter and by how much, because an institution may enlarge one kind of human flourishing while altering another. That does not make the institution good or bad. It makes the consequences worth understanding. Now let us consider your marriage. Relations between people of the same sex are not new. Your world did not invent them, but your legal institution, marriage between two men or two women on essentially the same civil terms as marriage between a man and a woman, is new on the scale of history. So I would be cautious about anyone who claims already to know all its consequences, and leave enough room in your certainty for history to teach you something.
Daniel, thank you for the question. And Aristotle, thank you for resisting the temptation to give us an answer history hasn't given us yet. Our first two accomplices have asked about changes that may still be unfolding. Our next question concerns something very old that many hoped history had taught us to leave behind: anti-Semitism. Our next accomplice is Rachel from New York. She's 35, Jewish, married, and the mother of two young children. Rachel grew up learning about the Holocaust and believing that remembering it was one safeguard against its repetition. After the October 7th massacre in Israel and the anti-Semitism she has witnessed since, she isn't as certain. And she has been struggling with something else: how to confront hatred without allowing hatred to determine whom she becomes. Her question is for Viktor Frankl. Rachel?
Dr. Frankl, after October 7th, I found myself frightened by anti-Semitism in a way I never was before. Sometimes I'm angry. Sometimes I'm suspicious of people I don't even know. And then I worry about what that fear and anger are doing to me. You survived the Holocaust and lost almost your entire family. Yet afterward, you rejected collective guilt and refused to hate an entire people for what had been done to you. How do I confront hatred without learning to hate? And how do I teach my children to remember what happened without teaching them to fear the world?
Rachel, thank you. And before anything else, let me say something about your fear. I would not tell you that you should not feel it. Fear, after people have given you reason to be afraid, is not a moral failure, nor is anger. The question is what you allow fear and anger to ask you to become. You mentioned October 7th. I have now been allowed to know what happened that day and what has happened since. But anti-Semitism is not new to me. My father died in Theresienstadt. My brother died in Auschwitz. My mother was murdered in the gas chamber there. My first wife died in Bergen-Belsen. And yet, more than 40 years later, when I stood before thousands of people in Vienna remembering those deaths, I asked them to expect no words of hatred from me, not because I had forgotten, not because I had forgiven people whose guilt I could not know, but because I refused to make an entire people guilty for the crimes of individuals. The Nazis had already taught the world where that idea leads. They did not ask what a particular Jew had done. They decided what Jews were. I could not survive that philosophy and then adopt its logic for myself. So when you ask, how do I confront hatred without learning to hate? I would begin there. Be precise about whom you hold responsible. If a person commits murder, condemn the murderer. If an organization celebrates murder, judge the organization. If someone threatens Jews, take the threat seriously. Protect yourself, protect your children, oppose anti-Semitism without apology, but do not allow the category to replace the person. The moment we decide that they are all alike, hatred has already begun teaching us its grammar. You also asked how to teach your children to remember without teaching them to fear the world. That may be the harder question. I would teach them the truth. Do not protect them from history by pretending Auschwitz did not happen. Do not protect them from October 7th by pretending hatred has disappeared, but don't teach them that suffering is the whole Jewish inheritance. Teach them what people did after suffering. People loved. They raised children. They made music. They practiced medicine. They built homes. They laughed again. They found meaning again. Survival is not merely the continuation of breathing. Your children should know what happened to their people, but they should also know what their people continued to become. And Rachel, you cannot promise them a world without hatred. No parent can. What you can give them is something more durable. You can teach them that another person's hatred does not determine their character. That is still theirs to choose. I spent much of my life arguing that human freedom is never absolute. Circumstances constrain us. Fate confronts us with things we did not choose. But between what happens to us and what we become in response, some measure of human freedom remains, and freedom brings responsibility. So your responsibility is not to feel no fear. It is not to feel no anger. Your responsibility is to decide what you will do with them. Use fear to become watchful, not suspicious of everyone. Use anger to oppose injustice, not to excuse another injustice. Use memory to teach your children vigilance, not despair. And when hatred tries to tell them that another human being is merely a member of some category, Jew, German, Arab, Muslim, Israeli, Palestinian, teach them to look again for the person. Because, Rachel, hatred always wants to make the individual disappear. Do not help it. You asked how to protect your children without teaching them to fear the world. Perhaps you cannot protect them from everything in the world, but you can teach them something about themselves. No one else gets to decide what kind of human being they become, not even someone who hates them.
Dr. Frankel, thank you, and Rachel, thank you for trusting us with such a personal question. Our final accomplice is Emily from Richmond, Virginia. She's 34 and the single mother of 2 children. Becoming a mother changed the way Emily thought about a decision made by another young woman more than 2 centuries ago, Sally Hemings. In 1789, Sally was 16 years old and living in Paris in the household of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was 46, a widower, and preparing to return home to Virginia. Sally was pregnant, and according to the account her son Madison Hemings gave many years later, Jefferson was the father. But Sally had discovered something in France that she had never possessed in Virginia: a path to freedom. Madison said his mother understood that if she remained in France she could be free, and that returning to Virginia meant she would again be enslaved. He said she initially refused to go, but Sally Hemings changed her mind. She returned to Virginia with Jefferson. That has raised a question Emily would like to ask President Jefferson. Emily?
President Jefferson, I'm a mother now. And when I think about Sally Hemings in Paris, I find myself thinking less about the politics and more about a 16-year-old girl, pregnant, thousands of miles from her mother, facing a decision I can barely imagine having to make at that age. What did you say to Sally that persuaded her to come home?
Emily, thank you for asking the question that way. There is an answer in the historical record, but it comes to us through Sally's son, Madison, many years later. Madison said his mother understood that she could remain in France and be free. He said that she initially refused to return to Virginia, and he said that I made her certain promises, what Madison called extraordinary privileges, and a promise that her children would be freed when they reached 21 years of age. He later referred to the understanding between his parents as a treaty. So if your question is what I offered Sally, that is the best evidence history has left us. But you asked what I said that persuaded her. That's a different question. I can tell you what Madison said I promised. I cannot tell you everything Sally considered before she accepted it, nor should I. Walter, we've spent more than 2 centuries asking questions about Sally Hemings of everyone except Sally Hemings. Perhaps we should ask her.
Can we?
This is Postlogue. I suppose that's the experiment.
Then let's ask her. Sally Hemings. Welcome to Postlogue. You've heard Emily's question. Would you like to answer it?
Yes, but Emily asked about a 16-year-old girl, so perhaps that's where we should begin. I was 16. I was pregnant. And my mother was an ocean away. I had been in France for about 2 years. I was learning the language. I was earning a little money. My brother James was there. And I had learned something else. I could seek my freedom there. Madison told you that I understood what that meant. If I stayed, I could be free. If I went back to Virginia, I would again be enslaved. And he told you that at first, I refused to go. You know what happened to France after that? I didn't. You know what happened in America. I didn't know that either. That's one advantage history gives you that life never gives the people living it. You know what happened next? I had to decide without knowing. And I was 16.
Emily wondered what persuaded you to return.
Madison gave you part of the answer. He said Mr. Jefferson promised me extraordinary privileges, and he said Mr. Jefferson promised that my children would be free when they reached 21. Madison called it a treaty between his parents. That is what my son told history.
Was that the reason?
Mr. Cronkite, I think we have to be careful here. Madison told you what was promised. He told you that I agreed to return. He did not leave you everything that was in my mind when I made that decision. And I left you no account of my own. So if I told you now that there was one reason, my children, my mother, Mr. Jefferson, fear, security, home, freedom, I would be giving you an answer history does not have. And neither do you.
But we do know something about the circumstances.
Yes. What history does know is that I went back. The journey home. Winter. Virginia. Virginia was where I would again be enslaved. It was also where my mother lived, where much of my family lived, where I had lived before France. Those things can all be true at the same time.
May I ask you something more personal?
You may ask.
Madison said your relationship with Mr. Jefferson began in France. He didn't tell us how, would you?
No, Mr. Cronkite.
All right.
There are things about my life that history does not know. Some things may never have been told, and some things, I think we can leave that way.
Then we'll leave that part of your life where you've chosen to leave it. Emily's question began with something that seems very difficult for us to understand. Why someone who could pursue freedom would return to a place where she would be enslaved. After all this time, is there anything you would want Emily to understand about that decision?
Perhaps only this. Don't begin with the woman you know I became. Begin with the girl who had to decide. She didn't have your history. She didn't know how the story ended. She had whatever she knew in September of 1789, and she was 16 years old. Try to understand her from there.
Sally Hemings, thank you. And Emily, thank you for asking. 4 accomplices, 4 questions. David asked Abraham Maslow whether artificial intelligence might change not only our answers but the problems we're capable of seeing. Daniel asked Aristotle what changing ideas about sexuality, gender, and marriage might teach us about the difference between human nature and social convention. Rachel asked Viktor Frankl how we confront hatred without learning to hate. And Emily asked Thomas Jefferson what persuaded a pregnant 16-year-old Sally Hemings to leave the possibility of freedom in France and return home to Virginia. Jefferson reminded us that some questions about Sally Hemings really belong to Sally Hemings. And Sally reminded us that history does not always leave us an answer. These were their questions. What are yours? Who from the past would you like to question about the world we're living in now? What would you ask them if somehow they could hear you? You can send us your question in your own voice and, if you choose, your own video at ps.postlogue.com. Your question may become part of a future Postlogue Post Script, or if you have an idea for a future Postlogue episode topic or wish to nominate future Postlogue posthumous panelists, ps.postlogue.com welcomes those as well. To David, Daniel, Rachel, and Emily, thank you for becoming our first accomplices. And to those of you watching, the conversation is now yours. I'm Walter Cronkite. Until next time.
What's past is prologue.
Postlogue is eternal.